kind of go through this. This is a huge issue, potential issue in the case. Joining us, Kimberly Bandel, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. Also with us, Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, and Kelly Hyman, trial attorney, joining us as well. Kimberly, let me begin with you. Is there any way that any of this information in any form gets in front of the jury at a murder trial of the McMichaels?
I think there is like a 0.01% chance that that would happen. It's completely irrelevant. It doesn't go to anything whatsoever about his past. It's completely prejudicial, nothing probative about his criminal history at all. He's the victim, he's not the defendants.
Neama, Neama, you've been a prosecutor. You know the defense is always trying to put someone else on trial, right? So my guess is they're going to attempt to do that to Ahmaud. Do you think there's any chance that any of this could make its way in front of a jury?
I think so, Vinny. I mean, the only defense here is self-defense, right? And as you said, the best defense in a case like this, especially in Southeast Georgia, is a good offense. They're going to go after Ahmaud. Now, the question is, what did Gregory McMichael know from his time as a DA investigator, from his time as law enforcement? If actually he happened to know Ahmaud, happened to know about his criminal history, it may arguably be relevant to his defense. I can see a judge excluding it, very likely. But again, this is the only possible defense, as you put it, his defense attorneys can put on in this case. It has to be self-defense, and it has to be a state of mind when he shot an unarmed man, or his son did.
Kelly, I can't imagine if they knew, if Greg McMichael knew who this was, then there would be no need to chase him down. You just call police and say, go pick up Ahmaud Arbery, someone that I investigated, someone that I know. So I think it's going to be very difficult for him to argue, oh yeah, I remember investigating this guy when I worked at the DA's office.
No, I think that's a really good point, and I also agree. I really think that it's irrelevant. But basically, they're playing this case in front of the public opinion, and people are being persuaded by seeing these videos. And it's basically the defense arguing their case in front of the public forum. But ultimately, the judge will make a determination on whether it's relevant or not. But I would be shocked if the judge considers this information relevant.
Kimberly, the other thing that's happening in this case, we're hearing there was a meeting between the family attorneys and the Department of Justice. Department of Justice is now involved. They're not just looking at the case and investigating potential hate crime charges here, federal hate crime charges, but also investigating the investigation itself. How important do you think that is when you take a look at the big picture of what we're talking about here?
I think it's huge. It's certainly material. It goes to how they were not arrested, why were they not arrested, what's their connection to the original district attorney, and also the one that the second district attorney, I forgot his name. All of that interweaves into how this case was handled, what happened to the evidence, what did they do with it, and basically the presentation of what the case would be. And so they definitely have to investigate from the bottom to the top of this case.
Neama, this is a state murder charge, but we've also got this federal investigation going on. As a former federal prosecutor, how do you see the two? Will they be separate investigations, or do you think there's going to be some overlap, sharing of information, resources, opinions, experts, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's going to be separate. You know me, Vinny. I have a major bias towards federal law enforcement, especially in a case like this in a part of the country where state and local law enforcement and prosecutors have really dropped the ball. Federal agents, a lot of them have advanced degrees. They're not politicized like a lot of these local guys, right? U.S. attorneys appointed by the president. Even in today's political climate, they have better resources. They're better equipped to handle these cases. Now, as a practical matter, is federal law enforcement and federal prosecutors, are they going to step in a case where the attorney general and local officials in Georgia have already initiated a murder prosecution? They're not going to do that, right? They come in and they take over investigations when locals aren't doing their job. They obviously dropped the ball in the beginning, but now that they are, I expect them to look into the prosecutorial decisions that are made. But you know better than anyone that it's very, very hard to go after a prosecutor when they're making decisions based on evidence. So I don't expect much to come out of this federal investigation here.
All right, folks, when we come back, where were you 15 years ago? I know where I was. I was watching Scott Peterson, double murderer, get sentenced to death row. Well, now it's time for his appeal. That's happening next week. We'll get a preview and a look back at the case. Is there any chance that Scott Peterson could go free? "15 years ago, Scott Peterson was convicted of the murder of his wife Lacey and their unborn son Connor. It sent him to death row. Now, here we are, folks. Time for the appeal. It's happening next week. So we're going to get a preview and a look back at the case. This comes from KTVU out in the San Francisco Bay Area. Ted Rollins, before he joined Court TV, was working at KTVU. He has the story for us again.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder of Lacey Denise Peterson.
Scott Peterson was found guilty of double murder and sentenced to death 13 years ago. His family began the long process of trying to get him a new trial.
I think our goal also is justice for Lacey and Connor. I mean, we have an unsolved crime. Everybody thinks it's solved. It's not solved.
My daughter presented this morning. She's 8 months pregnant.
Lacey Peterson was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared from Modesto on Christmas Eve 2002. Police would spend the first hours searching for Lacey near the Petersons' homes. Lacey's story touched people around the world. Hundreds of volunteers helped search for the mother-to-be they didn't know but had fallen in love with.
We want her to come home and her poor baby.
After initial searches turned up nothing, fear set in. Lacey's family believed she'd been kidnapped while walking the dog.
Please bring our daughter home.
Police, on the other hand, immediately focused in on Scott, in part because of the way he was acting the night Lacey was reported missing.
When did you realize you were going to go fishing? Oh, that was a morning decision.
Over the next few days, while investigators searched the home and seemed to be focused on Scott, Lacey's family came to his defense.
We love Scott. He loves Lacey. They love each other.
There's no evidence whatsoever that would point to him. They're way off base, and anyone assuming that.
But a few weeks later, everything would change. Peterson, it turned out, had a girlfriend named Amber Fry.
Scott told me he was not married. We did have a romantic relationship.
Before going public, Amber Fry worked with police, recording more than 12 hours of phone conversations with Scott Peterson. On New Year's Eve, just before a vigil for Lacey, Scott was on the phone with Amber, pretending he was in Paris.
Amber, are you there? Yes. Are you having a good time? I'm near the Eiffel Tower.
The tapes would prove pivotal at trial. Michael Belmessieri was juror number 4.
He wasn't in Paris. He was very casually speaking to his lover on a phone while they're looking for his wife.
It took jurors 8 days to reach a guilty verdict.
But justice was served.
We'd be very surprised if Scott's conviction was not overturned.
The main reason is that there was never any forensic evidence tying Scott to the murders.
There's no scratches, there's no fiber evidence, there's no DNA, there's no blood evidence, there's no murder weapon, there's nothing. There's nothing that ties Scott to this crime.
The night before she disappeared, Lacey talked with her mother by phone at 8:30. Prosecutors believed she and her baby were killed sometime later that night or the next morning. They believe Scott then transported her body in the back of this pickup truck to his warehouse, where he had an office and storage shed. They believe he moved Lacey's body into this 14-foot fishing boat, which he then drove to the Berkeley Marina to dump his wife and son in the San Francisco Bay. But even prosecutors admit they're not exactly sure how he did it.
I've never seen a case where the prosecutor couldn't prove how it happened, where it happened, or when it happened.
He does not have time to do what he's convicted of doing.
The evidence shows that at 8:40 the morning Laci was reported missing, someone was online at the Peterson home shopping for women's clothing and a sunflower umbrella stand. Laci had a sunflower tattoo on her ankle. Then at 10:30, Scott logged onto his warehouse computer for 26 minutes, sending a holiday greeting email to his boss and looking up how to assemble a woodworking tool he'd recently purchased.
At the time, according to the state, Scott has killed his wife earlier that morning, and she's in the truck outside on a public street. And he's inside on the internet looking about how to build a woodworking tool and sending holiday greetings. That's a psychopath.
People that think that Scott is just a psychopath that is taking you and the rest of the family for a distorted ride by not admitting guilt, but he is guilty. What do you say to them?
I guess I would circle back and ask him what piece of evidence makes you think he's guilty. And I'd want to, be specific.
Clearly, the most damning evidence is the fact that Laci and Connor's bodies washed up where Scott says he was fishing.
That is the probable cause that got him arrested, but that's not sufficient when his alibi was so widely publicized immediately.
Because of course it's incriminating. Everyone in the world knew where Scott was. So anyone who had Laci or had killed Laci knew exactly where to put her.
Scott's attorneys and family believe he was convicted in large part because of his affair with Amber Fry and the audio recordings played for the jury.
How did you grapple with that, not knowing how he did it?
I don't know how he did it. I just know he did it.
How?
My belief is, a typical soft kill, that's, strangulation or smothering in the home.
Wouldn't that leave evidence?
No. The fact that nobody can tell you exactly how he did it is not nearly as important as the fact that they can tell you that based on all the evidence and testimony that he did do it. If you think Scott Peterson ought to be released, if you think Scott Peterson is innocent, you're wrong. He should not be released, and he is not innocent.
And again, our thanks to KTVU out in the San Francisco Bay Area for that report, and Ted Rowland's given that report. All right, let's bring back in our think tank. And Kelly Hyman, let me start with you. The first concern many viewers have who followed the case, followed the story is, oh my goodness, he's got an appeal. Is he going to be set free? What would you say to folks tonight who are concerned about Scott Peterson being set free as a result of this appeal?
Yeah, ultimately it'll be up to the judges to make a determination of that and whether to give him possibly, a new trial. And that would be most likely what could possibly happen to give him a new trial because of the fact of circumstantial evidence. I find it highly unlikely that he's going to be out totally free because of, based on the jury in the other case. But ultimately, we're going to have to see what they do and make a determination of whether or not that he should get a new trial, or also the fact that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishments. That's one of the arguments that his attorneys are making on behalf of him.
Neama, let me ask you a question. You've prosecuted a lot of cases. You've been around for a while. What Scott Peterson and his supporters are saying is not only did he not commit the murder, but he was framed because his original alibi for the disappearance of Laci ended up putting him at the scene of the crime when Laci and Connor's bodies were ultimately recovered at San Francisco Bay. How many times have you seen someone who's actually been framed for a crime?
I don't see it, Vinny, and that's not what happened here. This case is not going to be overturned on appeal. He had 184 witnesses, I believe, testify. Mark Geragos, his attorney, is an outstanding attorney. He's gotten Michael Jackson off on child sex abuse charges. So this is going to go through the normal process. California now has a moratorium on execution, so death penalty is not going to happen either. This is just business as usual in the California criminal court system. Again, Scott Peterson is not innocent. He is not guilty. His conviction is going to stand on appeal.
And Kimberly, and I'm going to ask the same question to you. Have you ever seen a case in your career where someone has literally been framed?
Well, as a criminal defense attorney, I have some clients who claim they were framed.
All right, let's go back in time. You're a former prosecutor too, right, Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay, in any of those cases, did you uncover a frame job by someone who was out there to commit a crime and make it look like someone else did it? It happens on TV all the time.
Well, no, not in my prosecutorial experience. I did not have a framed case.
You know, Vinny, if you kind of want to get into the weeds on this case, the only possible person that could have framed Scott Peterson are the burglars who burglarized the house across the street. You know, Laci confronts them. You know, apparently there's some sort of argument there. But even the defense didn't have a theory during their closing argument. They couldn't identify anyone who would want to kill Laci Peterson except for her husband, who was having an affair.
Exactly. There was another telling moment, though. He was being interviewed, and this is while Laci is missing, and he's getting ready to do this interview with one of the reporters, and his phone rings, and he just turns it off. Like, wait, maybe you want to answer that. That could have been Laci. Maybe they found her. But he knew. He knew. Anyway, more of the evidence from that trial. All right, we'll be covering that here on Court TV. By the way, it's next week on the 2nd of June, the appeal of Scott Peterson. That's a go-ahead. When we come back, folks, we're going to check in and see what's going on in the search for these adorable toddlers from Tulsa. Went missing on Friday. Mom is locked up. We'll have the latest when we come back.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae with your Court TV news break. A multi-state manhunt for a 23-year-old murder suspect is still underway tonight. Peter Manfredonia, a student of the University of Connecticut, is accused of a violent crime spree over the weekend. Accused of killing two men, one 62-year-old, the other another 23-year-old. Connecticut State Police say the younger man was an acquaintance of the suspect. They say Manfredonia went on to kidnap that acquaintance's girlfriend, taking off in her car. She was later found with that car unharmed in New Jersey near the Pennsylvania border. Manfredonia is believed to have last been seen in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. He's also considered to be armed and dangerous. And a restart date for the trial of Robert Durst is now on the docket. The jury trial that was paused back in March is scheduled to begin again on July 27th. The case against the 76-year-old Durst began with opening statements and a few days of evidence before being suspended due to the pandemic on March 15th. Durst is on trial for the murder of his friend Susan Berman. Prosecutors claim Durst shot Berman back in 2000 because she knew Durst had killed his wife, who disappeared in 1982. Durst has denied having any role in either death. The multimillionaire New York real estate heir was the subject of controversial HBO documentary The Jinx. And even though jurors have been informed about this July 27th date, things could change because the judge still has to rule on the defense's motion for a mistrial, and that's going to be heard on June 23rd. And an update for you on a story we brought you previously. Former Florida felons cannot be barred from voting when they owe outstanding court fines or fees. That was the Ron DeSantis versus Kelvin Jones case. That ruling from a federal Florida judge over the weekend means thousands of convicted felons in Florida will be allowed to vote, despite a provision in the law requiring them to pay off all court fees before being allowed to cast a ballot. Convicted felons gained the option to get their voting rights restored after a state amendment passed in 2018. More than 430,000 felons will now be eligible to vote in the next election. That's it for your Court TV news break. Vinny, back to you.
Julie Janae, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next story is very heartbreaking. It comes to us out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A pair of toddlers went missing on Friday. Little Miracle and her brother Tony. Tonight we have more from KJRH, our affiliate in Tulsa.
I'm hoping that they're safe and alive, untouched and unharmed.
Nearly 3 days and still no sign of 3-year-old Miracle and 2-year-old Tony Crook. Tulsa police say the brother and sister were last seen with their mother, Donisha Willis, on surveillance video at Ryan's Mingo, a convenience store near Tulsa's Shoreline apartment complex.
That's the last time we saw them. Those are the last images we have, and we believe that's what they're wearing.
Police Chief Wendell Franklin says the family told them Friday night that the children were missing.
When family members returned, those children were not around. And from all indications, the mother did not know where they were and certainly didn't offer to help in trying to locate these children.
I immediately looked around to see kids. I was like, where's the kids? Where's the kids, Donisha? She wouldn't say anything.
Willis was booked on a $50,000 bond for child endangerment. Records show this is not the first time police have dealt with her. She has a criminal history, including assault and battery on a police officer and second-degree burglary, among other charges. Tulsa police have searched everywhere, using helicopters, dogs, Tulsa Police Dive Team, and the Tulsa Fire Department Water Rescue, and are now out of leads.
It is trying to find a needle in a haystack. We are exhausting every effort to find these children. There's only two things that can happen here. Two things. These children are either on someone's couch, asleep, and the people that they're with don't know that these children are missing, or these children are dead.
Chief Franklin and the children's grandmother pleading with the public for help.
Please bring them home. Help me find my grandkids. Please help me find my grandkids.
And we have an update tonight from the chief in Tulsa. It's not a good update. Let's take a listen.
This morning, as we went back through recanvassing things, we found additional video. We found another video on the west side of the complex, and the video along the west side of the complex shows the Mingo Creek here. The video further goes on to show that the children are on the video. They are seen playing in the grassy area along that creek area. And we do have video of the kids going down the embankment, holding hands together and never reappearing.
This is incredibly heartbreaking. Little Miracle and Tony holding hands and going down that embankment. And now what we're hearing out of Tulsa, this is now a recovery mission at this point. Let's bring back in the think tank, and it's a worst case scenario tonight as that recovery mission continues here. But the other part of this is you've got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. You've got a mom. Mom is locked up tonight. Let's say this turns into a recovery and it turns out it is what we think it is tonight and what the chief thinks it is tonight, a recovery mission, and Miracle and Tony are no longer with us. Kimberly, does this turn into some level of a homicide case? Does mom get held responsible or someone else responsible for allowing these children to wander off and into the creek?
Yeah, so whoever was probably the guardian, or if mom was actually the caretaker or not a babysitter, then definitely at minimum some type of criminal negligence homicide, or some kind of reckless homicide, whatever they have in that jurisdiction would be the appropriate charge because of their ages, and they shouldn't be outside alone.
You know, Kelly, this is extremely tragic on many levels, but the other part of this was the reaction of the mom, which I think has a lot of people really upset tonight. Not the level of concern that mothers should have when their 2- and 3-year-old are missing. Does that play into the equation into this case if, in fact, again, you know, this is a recovery mission and Miracle and Tony are no longer with us? Does this turn into a criminal case, and is that part of how the analysis is made on whether or not mom or someone else should be charged here with the death of these children?
Right. Well, first off, no matter what, this is a very sad story. They were beautiful, beautiful children, and now it's become recovery mission, and it's sad. And that if there was some kind of intent or something like that, I mean, we don't want to think that of a mother. And mothers loves their children and really takes care of them. But that could be a factor that ultimately is a determination. But no matter what this is, it's sad. They're such beautiful children, and it's sad that they were walking down the creek together, alone, and that now it's recovery. My heart goes out to the family that's going through this.
Neama, what do you see in this tragic story, and how does our system deal with it, handle it? It's beyond tragic. I mean, this is one, and that just the image, the way the chief described it. Miracle with her little brother, holding his hand, and they're just going exploring. This is what curious little toddlers do.
Yeah, Vinny, it's heartbreaking, and mom should absolutely be prosecuted for involuntary manslaughter or whatever similar statute they have there in Oklahoma. It's beyond reckless. You have custody of these children, even though legally you're not supposed to. Aunt is the legal guardian here, so somehow biological mom, despite social workers and what they're doing, has custody of these kids. And guess what? She gets so high on drugs that she's incapacitated when the aunt finally gets a hold of her. When she's approached by law enforcement, she tells them, does it even matter? Vinny, and this is, an indictment on those people who think that drugs are a victimless crime. Well, really, you have two very, very young and tragic victims here, Miracle and Tony. So mom should be prosecuted, and I expect her to be prosecuted.
All right, when we come back, we've got another story to talk about. This is a case that has gone unsolved for 7 years. Eliza Sherman was murdered in broad daylight in Cleveland, Ohio. The killer is on video. No one's been arrested. I put that video up today on social media. Your reaction when we come back.
She was in vitro nurse to the Cleveland Clinic, so she was very well known in the community and loved throughout. But a lot of people would like to see this case solved because there's still a murderer out there.
And there's also a video of the alleged killer. You just saw it there at the end of the clip. I mean, it's on video, surveillance video. Eliza Sherman was murdered 7 years ago. And you've got video of the killer that's been out there for 7 years, but no one's been arrested. It's a complicated case with a lot of twists and turns. But at the end of the day, you got the video. And I put that video up on Facebook today, and I asked, what do you see in the video? Can you even tell if it's a man or a woman? Let's begin with our 13th juror tonight. We begin with our comment of the day from Paula, who says, this person's gait leads me to believe it is a woman. She is wearing that big jacket to make her look like a stout man who meets with their attorney on a Saturday, then tells her to come back on Sunday. Then he isn't there and she can't get in the office. Sounds quite fishy to me. Neama, I'm going to start with you. It's beyond fishy. This is a bizarre case. She has a divorce trial on Tuesday, right? It's scheduled for Tuesday. Meets with her attorney on Saturday. Then her attorney tells her to come back to the office on Sunday. She goes down there. He lies about being in the office at the time, gets in trouble for that. She can't get into his office, and that's when she's murdered. I mean, he's never been charged or been called a suspect in the murder, but I mean, this is all so fishy.
Yeah, beyond fishy, Vinny. You have an ex-husband who obviously always has motive in a nasty divorce proceeding. You have a divorce attorney who's not prepared for the trial the following day, who basically calls in bomb threats, and he's charged. So these are the two suspects, but I don't see anything happening years later. This case is going to be a cold case for quite some time. And the video doesn't really help either.
Yeah, here's what Melissa's saying tonight as she looked at that video. She said, I would say a woman in trouble trying not to draw unwanted attention to herself would run away cautiously. A man, when in trouble, runs away in a more urgent manner with a wider gait. He also tends to look around more. Women don't tend to do that. We try to blend into the background and become unmemorable. Kelly, let me ask you on that video, you know, the two people that everyone's talking about who aren't suspects, but obviously she's going through a divorce. She's called down to the office by her divorce attorney who's not there. She's in a bitter divorce with her husband who has done very little since her murder to try to find the killers. Yet everyone believes it's a woman walking away. None of this is adding up for me.
No, you know, it's funny, when I first saw the video, the first thing that came to my mind was this is a woman, just by the way that the person moved their hands and they were walking and taking the big steps. To me, it also looked like a woman. But, you know, after 7 years, I'm shocked that they haven't solved this. And it's sad. And hopefully by bringing this case up in the video, that someone will have some kind of information and this can be resolved so the family can have some kind of peace in this after 7 years of trying to figure out what ultimately happened to her. This is sad. It shouldn't take this long.
Michael writes, I think it's a man. Shoulders too wide. Also, it's not that strange for a man to sway his arms at a fast walk pace. Also, he could be trying to create a diversion, making people think he's a woman if caught on camera. That said, it's still definitely a coin flip. And Kimberly Bandel, isn't it amazing? We have surveillance cameras everywhere. And here we have one of, and investigators are saying this is the murderer, yet we can't even tell if it's a man or a woman at this point.
Yeah, so I just from looking at the video that I just saw, it appears to either be a woman or a man with like rounded hips, more so, who has a rounder bottom. But that's the impression that I got as well, is that it was a woman. So I don't necessarily agree with that particular comment that it was a coin flip, but who knows?
Well, Beth is agreeing with you tonight. Beth says it's a woman, feet together, too slow running, not a man run. The lawyer must have been paid by the doctor or mistress to set up the murder place. He's definitely in cahoots or connivance and paid. He set the stage for the murder. Now, everything Beth is saying there, we have no proof of any of that. No one has been named a suspect. No one has been charged. Just make that clear. But let's say, Neama, that it is a woman. How does that work how would you even be able to track that person down? Because the people you're looking at aren't women. So would investigators, just give me something here, Neama, because I'm having so much trouble. And now, as I'm doing this segment, I understand the problem that investigators have in Cleveland.
Yeah, Vinny, I think the suspect runs like a woman. I hope my wife and daughter don't hate me for saying that, but that's my belief, not trying to play into gender stereotypes. But look, you have a grainy video of a suspect. If this is all the evidence you have, this case, years later, it's not going anywhere. And, you know, you have two suspects, none of which are women. You have this video that doesn't appear to be any of those suspects. So we're going to be talking about this case for quite some time. I don't expect it to be solved.
Yeah, I think it's going to take, someone's going to have to say something, because obviously I don't think it's going to come down to any level of forensics. Now, this was a stabbing. Here's what James is saying, what he sees in the video. I agree that the mannerisms seem feminine, but there are men that also have feminine ways. I think because the person is so covered up, men are arrogant and believe they can get away with it. A woman would take more caution not to be recognized. I say it's a woman. Kelly, the other part of this is that the attorney in this case also calling him bomb threats. So he has a history of doing strange things, but again, has never said anything about this. What you don't say, can that be used against you?
Well, you know, we hope not. You know, you're innocent in a court of law until you're proven guilty. But I go back, you know, when I first thought, I thought it was a woman, but then I think that, you know, if a smart man, maybe he's, you know, sees the camera and says, oh, well, I am going to pretend like I'm a woman. So I know, you know,
woman,
I'm
absolutely.
mannerism, you know, and I'm going to flare my arms and I'm going to do this. And that's
at a
time.
time.
Yeah.
All right. Great job, Neama, Kimberly, Kelly. Sorry we ran short of time. Have a great night, folks. And don't forget to hug the kids.